A human life can be destroyed in just a few minutes, not by a court decision, not by a judge, and not by a lawful investigation, but a crowd that feels certain, it is right. One accusation is enough, one rumor can change everything. Facts, stop mattering, emotions take over, and people who are just standing there suddenly feel justified in acting. This is mob violence, and when it turns into punishment or killing outside the law, it is called mob lynching. If you want to understand how something like this began, how it becomes acceptable to the people, and why it keeps repeating across the history and society, let's start from the beginning. So, first of all, the word lynching comes from the United States, but the behavior behind it existed long before the term was ever created. Historically, the term is linked to the Charles Lynch, who lived during the American Revolution. At that time, the United States had weak policing and unreliable courts, especially in rural areas. Because formal justice was slow or absent, people began supporting unofficial punishments. Charles Lynch defended this idea of punishing accused individuals without proper legal procedure, and this practice became known as the lynch law. Over time, this idea spread and changed. By the 19th century, lynching, no longer meant informal punishment, but violent mob action. In the southern United States, it became a tool of racial terror, mainly targeting African Americans. In 1905, sociologist James Cutler described lynching as America's national crime because how openly and frequently it occurred. Activists like Ada B. Wells later showed that lynching was not justice at all, but organized violence used to control and frighten the entire communities. But it is very important to understand this clearly, that lynching did not begin in the United States. And it did not begin with the word, lynching. The term may have come from the United States, but the behavior existed earlier in other societies. Like a clear example comes from 1672 AD in the Netherlands, where an angry crowd killed two brothers and publicly displayed their bodies. At that time, people did not use the word lynching, but the logic was, exactly the same. A crowd decided guilt, ignored legal authority, and acted violently to send a public message. This shows that mob lynching is not tied to one culture or one language. It appears whenever people lose trust in law and believe that collective violence is justified. The name came later, the behavior came first. As societies developed, this pattern continued to appear in different forms. Scholars studying mobs describe them as localized collectivities, groups of people physically present together, influencing one another in real time. Not every crowd is dangerous. Some crowds are casual, like people waiting at a station. Some are expressive, like people celebrating or mourning. Others are conventional, like audience at even. The most dangerous for me is the acting crowd, where people are emotionally charged and focus on changing or pushing something. A mob is an active crowd that believe it has moral or social right to act. Understanding this help explain why mob violence follows recognizable pattern rather than appearing out of nowhere. Now, to understand why normal people behave differently inside the crowd, psychology becomes important. One earlier thinker like Gustave Le Bon argued that people lose self-control in crowds and become driven by emotion. Later researchers refined this idea. Like one explanation is de-individuation, where individuals feel anonymous inside a crowd and stop feeling personally responsible for their action. Another explanation is emotional contagion, where fear, anger, or excitement spreads rapidly from one person to another. More modern theories are focused on social identity, like people act according to what they believe their group represents. If the group identity is shaped by fear, misinformation, or hostility, people follow that identity even if it leads to violence. This explains why people who would never harm someone alone can support violence when surrounded by others who feel the same way. This psychological process explains how crowds turn into mobs, but it does not fully explain why people encourage mob violence. Research shows that encouragement often comes from practical reason, not just emotion. One major factor is impunity. When violence happens in a crowd, responsibilities become unclear. People believe they cannot be easily identified or punished. This creates a dangerous sense of safety. If past incidents go unpunished or take years to resolve, it sends a message that mob violence is survivable. That belief alone encourages repetition. Another strong reason is frustration with the justice system. When people believe police are slow, biased, or ineffective, instant punishment begins to look attractive. Instead of waiting for courts, people convince themselves that quick action is necessary. This is not because they love violence, but because they have lost confidence in formal justice. Over time, the mindset normalized mob action as the alternative system of control. Economic pressure also plays an important role. Periods of financial stress, unemployment, or social change often increase the need to blame someone. After slavery was abolished in the United States, economic anxiety led many to blame freed black communities for instabilities which feed mob violence. The same patterns appears elsewhere. Economic fear does not directly cause violence, but it creates conditions where scapegoating feels emotionally satisfying. When people feel insecure, blaming a vulnerable group becomes easier than questioning the system or leadership. Modern communication had made this process faster. Social media spread rumors at extreme speed. Messages are shaped without verification. Videos are edited out of context, and emotional content travel faster than factual correction. By the time authorities respond, the crowd may already be formed. Sociologists describe modern societies as highly networked, where mobilization happens faster than institutional control. This explains why accusation today can turn into violence within minutes. Let's see its another side, and that is political influence, which can also encourage mob violence. Identity-based politics can frame violence as protection of values, religion, or community honor. Even when leaders do not directly call for violence, silence or ambiguous message can legitimize it. When violence is linked to identity, people stop seeing themselves as attackers or start seeing themselves as defenders. Because of these combined factors, psychological, legal, economic, socio, and political, mob lynching continues to appear in different countries. In parts of India, accusation of witchcraft, religion offenses have led to public attacks. In Europe's past, witch trials, followed the same logic. The accusations, changed, but the structures remain the same, like fear, rumor, crowd, and formation and violence outside the law. So that was the problem. Many people will ask that what are its solution. So first, is trust in law must be restored. When people believe courts work and police will act fairly, the desire for instant justice decreases. Second is accountability must be visible. If perpetrators are pushed quickly and clearly, the idea of impunity weakens. And the third is misinformation must be addressed early, especially online. Rumors should trigger verification, not mobilization. Finally, education matters. Teaching empathy, critical thinking, and patience reduce the emotional fuels that mobs depend on. Mob lynching does not start with violence, it starts with certainty. The certainty that we are right, that proof is unnecessary, that the crowd knows best. The world may have comes from the American history, but the behavior is older than the name and broader than one country. If we understand that, we stop seeing mob violence as a sudden madness and start seeing it as a preventable social failure. If this explanation helped you understand the issue more clearly, like the video and share it so the other can learn. Subscribe for more thoughtful content, and thank you for watching till the end.